Good evening. It is 5 p.m. on the dot. I'm Rob Watt, and I'm calling the Public Safety Committee meeting of Monday, December 1st, 2025 to order. Tonight's meeting is being recorded and will be available on the city's website. Thank you for joining us. And very first thing is we will do roll call. Um, Present are council members Cotton and Christensen, as well as myself. We have Clerk Dean, Mayor Ross, City Administrator Chambliss, City Attorney Burke, and our legal extraordinaire, Robert Thrall. Good evening. With that, the next thing that we move on to is the approval of the agenda. We are going to have one swap out. Did I do that? No, I don't know. One swap out. Agenda bills, we are going to swap number 2 with number 3. That puts AB 25-122 before AB 25-123. If there's no objection, we will change the agenda order as that. Is there anything else to add or delete from tonight's agenda, council members?
No, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. The agenda is approved as amended. And with that, the next thing that we move on to is public comments. Unless there's somebody from staff, be it the fire department, the police department, coming forward to speak on public comments matter. I do not see anyone else in the room. Just keep in mind, if you're tuning in, you can always send your comments in if you can't make it in person, but we'd love to have you in person. Then you can share with us here. So seeing no one here, I will close the public comment section now. And with that, we'll move on to minutes. The approval of the minutes dated November 17th, 2025. Council members, are there any additions, corrections?
No, sir.
Okay, no changes. We will accept the minutes as presented. And next item, the agenda bills. And we will lead off with AB 25-122, resolution adopting the new indigent defense standards. Chief Harese, good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Today, we're looking at adopting the new Supreme Court standards. Back on June 9th of 2025, they adopted new standards. The last were adopted on September 2nd of 2012, which were adopted through this council at that time. Under Resolution 1164. Due to changes in these standards where they're limiting the number of cases that each public defender can work, we're presenting this resolution to adopt the new standards so that we can continue on with updating our contract with Valley Defenders, which is our next item. What the standards did was it changed to where the caseload reduction ultimately for a 12-month period, each defender or each public defender would only be able to work 47 felony cases or case credits. And then in misdemeanors, it would reduce to 120 misdemeanor case credits. That goal sets us up for a 10-year period. And so this is going to be a staged in process. It's not going to happen overnight, but just because of the number of public defenders that are needed to kind of help alleviate some of that workload. You can't hire them all in one sitting, as you know, no different than the rest of us, and trying to hire people and then find those people that are qualified. Over the next several years, we're looking at an approach of having like a 10% difference an increase or a decrease for their workload to get them to that, those case management, those case, credits. And these rules take effect January 1 of 2026. So that's why we're trying to get everything through, and get these contracts updated. So in essence, this one is just making sure that we would be looking at repealing the previous resolution, which is 1164, and adopting this one to just meet the standards that the Supreme Court of Washington has set in place. I received one question from Councilmember Cotton over the week, or at the end of last week, about the wording in section 2 of the orders, and that was on policy creation. And at this time, there's no need for policy creation by us. We contract our services. We're constantly evaluating those services. And should anything change to where we needed to, we would work with our partner agencies who also contract with Issaquah and Valley Defenders to work through that. Because it's us, Issaquah, PD, Issaquah Court, and then Carnation and Duval, and then the city of North Bend, who all contract with the same company, or same entities as well for court services. So I hope that answers your question on that one.
Thank you.
Okay. I guess with that, are there any other questions on this one? We've kind of talked about this over the course of the last several months off and on, so.
I have no other questions.
Yes, Councilmember Christensen, please.
I think just since the proposed resolution here is also repealing resolution 1164 from June 2012, if possible, I'd like to see attached, just so that we know what we're repealing.
To attach that one? We can attach that one.
And I guess, I do have another question too.
Please.
Do we have basically some counts right now showing what our attorneys are typically handling in terms of caseload?
So what they're proposed, when we look at the next agenda bill, it's gonna show that they're looking at reducing to 220 cases up front. So that's what they will be looking at. I don't remember, Melinda might be able to help me with that number a little more. So I'll bring her up because she's doing some of those numbers for us.
Hi, Council. I can get you those numbers. I did request them and we have them, but I just don't have them with me currently. So I can definitely get you those.
Okay, thank you. And then I did also, just as I was looking through, I noted that the fee to do an appeal is $1,000, but I didn't see how or if any appellate work is actually tied into the case counts. I don't know if that's,
So believe
I
it or
don't know how
not,
frequently we appeal.
we haven't had any appeals since I've been here. We have had some contracted services done recently that
Okay.
we just were invoiced for, and it was for 3 cases. Yes, where there was a conflict and we ended up sending it out, but we haven't had any appeals as well since I've been here.
Okay.
And I would mention too that I believe it was upwards of 90% of our cases use a public defender. So it's a substantial amount of our cases. So.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I have a question, knowing that King County is actually increasing the number of public defenders. I believe it's 12 or 17. I don't remember exactly. 17. Without increasing on the prosecutor side, and it raises a curiosity on my part, and that is, are there any cases that we send up that it's just statute of limitations runs out because of the challenges with that?
Yes, we had a denial earlier this year where the statute of limitations ran out.
Okay.
We had an incident, or this wasn't due to statute of limitations, but we had a decline today on a case where we made an arrest at the end of last week. And they just looked at their caseload basically and some of the other things and told us to, if we wish, we could file it in municipal court.
Okay,
So some of those cases that would typically go felony level
Mhm.
we're now pushing to the municipal courts
okay,
because of their workload and how they're affected. And I know that the King County prosecutor, Ms. Mannion, has asked the council for more money and more prosecutors and more and just overall more staff to help handle that. Where that's fallen, I'm not sure. I know there's still a lot of discussion around it.
okay. It'd be good to have that information documented on our side so that we can track it. If you can, Melinda, if you can include that as well into those numbers, that would be helpful. Just so that we keep it top of mind. Is there anything else? Council, staff? Do you have any comments? This is kind of in your realm, Ms. Burke.
But anything specifically about the-
Legal standpoint or just another point of view?
I mean, for the public defender standards, I mean, I think you're right at the, they're hiring more public defenders. In terms of the declines, pushing more work and cost onto municipalities, that's a concern a lot of municipalities have in King County. And there's not a great legal solution to it. I think several years ago, several South King County cities wrote a letter of concern to King County regarding how King County was handling cases. But that's pretty much the main avenue that I've seen cities bring up, that it's really hard to push back on the county regarding that, but it's a concern that a lot of cities have, that that's the outcome from this is going to be, we're the last, when cases get pushed down from county, there's nowhere that we can push it down below this, beyond the city.
Right.
And so it's either it isn't prosecuted or our costs increase or both.
Additional information, I bet.
Since you pulled it up.
Okay. I did find those numbers, and it looks like for 2023, we had 167 misdemeanor cases. 153 of those required public defense. In 2024, we had 117, and looks like 127 needed public defense, but that's probably because there's warrant arrests from the previous year, so it's a little bit higher. And then we had a projected for 2025, we did this back in August, at 140 and 128 of those needing public defense services.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. All right. Any further questions? Okay. Thank you, Chief. The other one is related to it is Valley Defense.
Yes.
I want to go through that and then we'll make a determination. I presume we're going to talk between putting it on consent or not on consent.
The bill.
Any suggestions?
I think giving the rest of the council a chance to ask any questions
Okay.
and give it,
Put it under the regular agenda
yeah.
items. Okay, sounds good. Chief, help us
Okay.
out with the next one.
So the next one is again related to the previous, because of the standards change, Valley Defenders has updated their contract. So due to the change in the caseload requirements, Valley Defenders is proposing a new contract with an adjusted dollar amount. We've been contracting with Valley Defender since 2013, to be exact, January 13th. And what they're looking at doing is reducing their caseload to a 225 case maximum for 2026, which is requiring an additional half FTE. And then they are looking at increasing the dollar or the fees due to 160,000 per year. So currently, I think we were sitting at about right around the $80,000 range. We budget a little over 100,000 for that. So it's a considerable jump. Part of that is again, this comes down to the requirements and how they can meet those standards. They've had, just like everybody else, trouble keeping people. And they're just doing what they can to make sure that they can meet these standards. So they've done some hiring and things like that. The contract is attached to this packet, and overall, would be paying about $13,333.33 a month, with a few changes towards the end of the year to make it the even 160. Where they're looking at reducing, to answer that question earlier, the 225 cases per year. And then they still have the appeal fee in there, which hasn't changed. It's the $1,000. Councilmember Cotton emailed me the question about the termination. Should either entity choose to terminate the contract, it had 60 written out and then 90 days in parentheses. We've updated that. We spoke with them, and it's going to have 90 throughout it. So the updated one will be attached for council when we take it to there.
Great.
So that's already been taken care of. Other than that, nothing has really changed in there. Attorney Dina Burke has gone through this as well and worked with them to clarify some language since the last contract was done in 2013. So, any questions?
Council? Yes, Councilmember Christensen.
Thanks. So my concern may not be as much with 2026, but have they disclosed their plans on how they're going to increase their staffing? Because I know that we're not the only city that they contract with, and just making sure that they're able to, as we look forward to like 2026 and beyond, making sure that they have enough capacity to serve the cities that they're supposed to serve. Because there are not a finite number of public defenders. It's not necessarily, where a number of law students go after they graduate.
So one thing they have talked to me about is retaining, working on retention. They're offering benefits, things like that, so that they don't lose people. And then going forward, we are going to be continually talking with them about what the future looks like and reevaluating. I think we only extended this one for a year, but I'll let Attorney Burke.
It's 1 year with an option to renew for a second year, but that's the supply of public defenders is a huge concern in the legal community, because over the last 5 years, criminal law is a field that new law student graduates are not going into for a variety of different reasons. And so that was a large concern about the Supreme Court adopting this new standard, is that the supply of defense attorneys just does not exist in the state. And so that is a concern that's out there. I know the head attorney for this firm sent interim chief an email about the steps they're taking to recruit and retain attorneys, but that's a valid concern that's out there.
So keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
What else we can really do from where we're at.
And we'll continue to assess, and if they can't meet our needs, then we have options at that point, because this gets us through the next year, and we can look at the next biennium and how things are going to affect us, and whether or not we need to look and open up for an RFP process and find somebody else, or if they can make it work and they get people to come to them.
So I think, there's two pieces to this. First of all is the burnout that's being caused on public defenders. And part of the reason why people are leaving the profession is just the caseloads have been enormous. And hopefully this will help mitigate it, but it comes at a cost. And that cost is probably why Drew is in the room as well. Because it kind of helps to lead to, this discussion that we're going to have around the potential sales tax increase to help offset some of the costs. And Mr. Boutte, did you want to chime in at all with just kind of helping us understand where the money might be coming from?
They'll put us out on the corner with
Yeah.
A little panhandling out there.
Take it you just don't show up to public safety because it's a fun topic.
There,
Sometimes it is.
there's a lot of lessons I think we can all learn. And that's probably one of those that I need to learn myself. But we've had a conversation about the public defender. What we included in the budget amendment the council recently passed was an increase in the budget authority basically to support this contract. Right now, we're relying upon current revenue sources in order to support that increase in this public defender, these expenses overall. But as a part of our last presentation, what we presented to council was a financial forecast that can certainly show maybe some degree of alarm around kind of our financial picture and the direction that's heading as a result of some of these increases like the public defender expenses that we're seeing. As a part of that presentation, we presented a number of kind of strategic options and kind of different lanes for council to focus on. One of those lanes included enhancing revenues. The other two included developing economically. And the third one was optimizing levels of service. When we're looking at the public safety sales tax, there's really public safety enhancement sales tax. There are two components to that. First one is a grant, which isn't necessarily going to support the public defender, but the other option was the 0.1% public safety enhancement sales tax. That would generate roughly $300,000+ of money for the city that could be used for the public defender and potentially other expenses associated with criminal justice here at the city overall. So that is one of the options the council might explore. There's certainly some qualifications that we have to meet in order to be able to kind of take out that 0.1% public safety enhancement sales tax councilmanically. But there are certainly some other options that were a part of that table overall that council may want to explore. And some decisions will have to be made, particularly in the new year, in relation to some of these cost increases like we're seeing from the public defender. Hopefully that summarizes that well.
Okay, and remind me once again, did we approve the 160,000 for our budget for this or 100,000?
So it was less than that. I think it was roughly, we've doubled the cost of the public defender, so about 80
Okay,
in total. Yeah.
okay.
Of additional appropriations. So we had initially appropriated for the public defender expenses, but because they're expected to double, we need that additional appropriation for that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Other questions? Comments?
No, I'll just point out the fact that they're gonna keep, the costs are gonna keep increasing, right? As they have, as they're continuing to cut their caseloads. So just, it's not a one-time,
Right,
you know, we're doubling, but we're gonna have to consider how to pay for it down the road as well. So
okay,
be prepared for
point.
that.
very well. Okay, we'll move both of these items unless there's any objection to our regular agenda item. Okay, all right. Anything else, Chief?
No, I think Councilmember Christensen got it spot on when this is year one. We have a 10-year cycle of potential increases. So it is something that we have to, keep our eye on. And this is a big shock for the first year, but they're also working on trying to retain people and things like that. So they've had to make those adjustments, and that means the rest of us do too.
So following up on that, I mean, if we're increasing the defense attorneys, what about on the prosecution side? Are we going to see continual increases there just to keep up with the loads, or because it seems like crime isn't decreasing. It seems like it's kind of maybe stabilizing.
So I think our workload we haven't really gotten into that deep dive conversation. We are going to have some adjustments coming up for potentially for our prosecution side and with the courts, just because of the adjustment from the separation of policing North Bend as well. So we're going to have some contractual stuff that we'll work through at some point next year. But at this time, I don't foresee a lot of major changes like we are in public defense, which is mandated by law, where they have the right to representation. And as y'all heard earlier, I mean, the majority of our cases do get public defense. Prosecutors are there either way ultimately, but I think we'll see a little bit of a change, but I'm not expecting it to be a drastic change like this one.
Okay. Mayor Ross?
Oh,
Uh,
to answer your.
Attorney Burke?
Thank you. Answer your question, Councilmember Watton. I think, this is just kind of guessing, but I do think there will be an increase in prosecution costs because of the market. You know, if public defenders have, depending on how things shake out, if they're getting paid more and have a lower caseload, there's sort of, in order, it's that whole recruitment and retention of attorneys in criminal law, which is not a field that people are really wanting to go in and stay in as much as, 20 years ago. So I think that there will likely be increased costs also for prosecution firms to remain competitive. And we currently contract prosecution services with a firm that prosecutes, similar to how Valley Defenders provides public defense services.
So this may be a good time if somebody's considering a career change or career aspirations to jump into one of those pools. Councilmember Christensen.
So just as a question then, if we're anticipating seeing, this much of a case reduction on both sides, are we anticipating that there will be less cases pled out then and that there will be more time spent in court on both sides?
So
as
that-
more cases are going to trial?
That's a concern that has been raised, that if, public defenders now have a lower caseload, does that mean we're probably going to see a more robust motions practice from defense attorneys that now, in theory, I have no idea if this is going to be true or not, because I've never been a public defender. In theory, you'll have these public defenders that have way more time on their hands, so they have time to, pontificate and do legal research and come up with creative arguments and motions practice. So then that will create more workload on the prosecution side as well.
And then I have one more question, I'm sorry.
Sure,
Can I ask it?
please.
And so as we see this happening, are city attorneys talking about whether it makes sense then to pull a public defender within the city instead of contracting it out?
So I would need to research that. My understanding is that
A weird position.
it's a weird position, and there's a conflict of interest concern that's been brought up in the past for having an in-house public defender
Mhm.
because of, their boss basically, would be the city administrator, mayor, and that just creates awkward lines. So I don't know of any cities our size that have in-house public defenders. I'm not sure about, I would need to check on like Seattle and Tacoma to see what their cities of that size are doing.
Okay.
But there's been a lot of concern about the conflict of interest issues in the past.
Okay, thank you.
And I think another matter too is if we're looking at our contract, it's $160,000 a year. It gives us flexibility. If we were to have one in person, even if it's 3/4 times, FTE, 160 probably is a good value for us, just because the cost of a legal person is going to be far in excess of that. So it might be pro rata sort of thing. Yeah, Councilmember Christensen.
I think one of the things to consider though too is if this new caseload, like whether these attorneys are going to be just handling that as a PD caseload or whether they're going to be taking in additional cases that have to do with something else and whether those would be counted in as well.
Mm.
Because I don't know how that would be. Like, for example, if we had like 120, misdemeanor cases or whatnot, and, an attorney, if they were just focused on that, would still have however many hours to do outside work or other types of things like
Mhm.
code enforcement, which would also be kind of a sticky wicket situation too. But
I guess it'll be a great discussion to come back to in a year from now, whether we can, renew the contract, right? Because this is on a 1-year renewal
It's 1 year with an option to renew for a second year.
for a second year.
And then, there would be options of entering another contract, or we could look at doing an RFP.
So we would be starting this new contract January 1st. We'd be doing a review in September or so for the following year.
Correct.
So at that point, we'll have a pretty good idea of whether we continue to move forward on this. It does kind of get us locked in. Is there a step increase as far as inflationary increase, or are we locked in for the second year to this rate?
Thought we said we would negotiate.
Negotiate,
I think
okay.
I think I read
So-
that, yeah.
it was like 15%.
So, I want to make sure I get Mayor Ross and then Councilmember Cotton.
Thank you. So the numbers that we received earlier, are those combined with North Bend or they are Snoqualmie only? Snoqualmie only, okay. So the 225 cases are for Snoqualmie. Are
Just-
other cities getting the similar number?
They're
Everyone-
with Valley Defenders, they're working on that same number. So that's what they're trying to reduce to each of their staff. And then from there, they will reduce every year until we hit that, the Supreme Court standard of the 120 or whatever it is. And then they, 47 for felonies, they're going to 47.
So point of clarification for Mayor Ross's question. For instance, Duval is slightly smaller than us. Are they at a lesser rate than we are? I guess, is that the question that you're asking? Obviously, Carnation is
I'm just curious, is
considerably
it
smaller.
225 across the board, or is it based on, some type of increase based on the, cases we've had in the previous years?
So the 225 is what they're trying to reduce their caseload per attorney. So right now we're running about 140. So they're running those numbers off of what we're currently running. They ran the numbers on that. So that's where that is. Their goal is the 225 for 2026. So one of our public defenders, for instance, on our case, if let's say we have 20 cases there and Duval has 5, they may take on all 30 cases, that one person. So they're dividing it out. So they're just trying to reduce their caseload to that. But the numbers are going, their expectation is we're going to run off of what our projected numbers are on what we've been doing over the last couple of years.
Thank you.
So to follow on to that question, is back to Mr. Boutte, do we have an anticipation, because knowing that we've got this 10-year step up in this, what the potential could be 3 years out, 5 years out, just with the cost of living going up, COLA's going up? I'm kind of curious about what we're going to be facing down the road on this.
So in terms of inflationary increases, I think we know that there's this kind of step up that's going to take place with the public defender contract. There's going to be inflationary increases as a part of that too. Part of why this sales tax proposal is tied to, I guess, potentially these increases is if the cost of services are increasing at the rate of inflation, ideally the sales tax revenue that you're generating as well is increasing at the rate of general inflation as time progresses too. So ideally your sales tax revenue is going to help to sustain or at least keep up with the cost in the public defender contract that is tied strictly to the inflationary aspect to it. But in terms of, say, a proposal that we would develop in terms of those step-up increases that might come as time progresses, we don't have any firm proposal at the moment.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. Councilmember Cotton,
So, kind of 2 questions, if that's okay.
please.
And I feel like we discussed this before, so please stop me if you've heard this question already. The 160,000 a year is going to be no matter how many cases. Like if we only had half of the number of cases, if there was a substantial drop in crime rate, we'd still be paying the 160. It's not going to be changed by the caseload from Snoqualmie.
I'm reading through that real quick to clarify.
Attorney Burt,
Yeah.
do you
so
want to chime in on?
There's a clause in the contract that if there's a 15% change up or down, the parties agree to mutually negotiate.
Yeah. But for how long of a period does it, I mean, it didn't really say like consistently for the year or consistently for a month or,
So I think if at any time it's true, it doesn't say a time period. It just says if it goes up 15% or down 15% or more, we'll renegotiate. So we'll keep our eyes on the caseload counts or I assume the police staff will. And then if it goes too high, I'm sure that Valley Defenders will tell us.
right.
If it goes too low, we'll make sure to reach out to them.
Yeah, okay. And then kind of the other part I had was in the information from the Supreme Court and stuff, it was saying that there wasn't really going to be any evaluation of how that was working for at least 3 years, if I read that correctly. And so, and that was part of the question that I sent you is, so how and who is going to be doing the kind of the monitoring or setting the guidelines and enforcing it, I guess?
So
Or-
it comes down to all the entities that are involved, in essence, because we're watching what our caseload is. Crime changes with the economy, time of year, all of that stuff. So we have to kind of keep an eye on all of that, and then work with all of our partner agencies. We process all the invoicing here, so we see those fluctuations. We'll see through the court, even the fluctuations for our fees with just the court services or even the prosecutor side of things. So there's always an evaluation going on. And that's just kind of a standard for us because we're limited on resources, right? So we have to kind of watch all of that, and which is why I think when we were talking about it and looking at this contract, and making sure that we have the option to look at our options down the road, that's why that's there, that shorter term.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and just looking through the numbers here, and thank you for those questions. If we're decreasing, if they're decreasing their caseload by 10% a year over the next 10 years, I assume. And if we assume COLAs may be, especially if they're being more competitive in paying for the attorneys that they hire, that we're talking realistically, maybe 15% increase each year. So what's 160,000 to us this year will become $24,000 more expensive next year, and it could be higher. I mean,
It can fluctuate.
unless I'm misreading this reduction in attorneys, I mean, that's directly impactful to our ongoing costs that we need to be mindful of. So I guess it's going to be really important for us to come back and revisit this in September and make sure that, we're trued up. And the real impact's not going to be this coming year. It's going to be 27, 28 when we've seen, we're getting closer on the fiscal cliff of everything. So, okay. Anything else? Any other questions? Glad we had a chance to walk through this. It'll be interesting with the council, the full council. Anything else, Chief?
Not until the next one.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Okay, so we'll put both of those on the regular agenda. And then we're moving on to the next one, unless there's anything that I missed there. Okay. We'll move on to the behavioral health specialist discussion. And we got about 10 minutes for that.
I'm going to make it as quick as possible. If I can get this to go away. There we go.
The cost of crime is not going down.
Okay.
It's a moral story.
So as we've had several questions from y'all, where I want to discuss our mental health professional position. We respond to a multitude of calls, including crisis intervention calls, or those who are suffering from mental health crisis. The focus of our department is obviously continuing to meet and exceed the minimum annual standards set forth in training. The department is required to, I'll back up. So one of the things that we have to us is a lot of crisis intervention training. One of those is a 40-hour CIT class. Then we have one that is a 2-hour class that we have to do annually for every officer. Currently, the department is a little over 50% completed on the 40-hour CIT class. We are required by a court ruling to only have 25% of the department. My goal to have attended this class. My goal is by the end of next year is to have 100% compliance. One of the reasons we're pushing that out so far is our staffing at the moment and maintaining service in both cities. So we're pushing that out. We'll start picking that class back up in April, sending at least one person per month to the classes as long as they're available. Currently, we're required to attend 24 hours of annual training, which we have far exceeded, especially for this year. And then we're required to attend 40 hours of training every 3 years. That includes crisis intervention training or de-escalation of some sort. So that's an additional requirement on top of that 24-hour training cycle. With the loss of North Bend and looking at what 2026 and beyond looks like, we've talked about what our staffing models look like and things like that. So we're going to have the chief, the captain, 2 administrative positions, 4 sergeants, 8 patrol officers. Then I don't have the SRO in here, but that leaves a minimum of 2 officers minimum per shift. We're going to have 3 staffed on the road, and the department continues to assess what we're doing in the world of crisis intervention and how we're meeting the needs of our community. So in looking at some of our statistics, I went back to 2023. There's a couple things here, and if you have questions on the exact coding, I'll have Melinda come up here because she does things for NIBRS and state reporting. And that is what one of the top line is, where it says actual crisis intervention, the 606 code. So in 2023 and 2024, you can see our numbers were quite high, and these are just Snoqualmie numbers. So that was 354 in 2023, 351. The numbers just below those are where it says CIT calls, though that 297 is included in the 354. So when she's coding things for the reports that we have to do to the on the federal level and on the state level, she might find something that she feels needs to be reported. So those numbers kind of increase a little bit. Then in 2025, you'll see right now we're sitting at about 30 crisis intervention calls where we have just been dispatched, and that's what they've been coded by dispatch when they come into the call center. Overall, we've had about 73 that we're going to report on. And the next line we were using when an officer or the mental health professional herself when she was on during those 2 years would flag like she was going to do follow-up, or an officer may have thought they needed to have her follow up or check on somebody. So those numbers are kind of all inclusive of those top numbers up there. In September of 2024, the mental health professional position it was filled, but it wasn't being utilized due to leave and where we are currently. So you'll see where the officers have kind of continued to practice, where there's still the 10 that have been flagged. To date, we have had 17 involuntary commits. That's where we have taken somebody to the hospital and had them involuntarily committed. In 2024, there were 7, and in 2023, 12. Below that, you'll see our total calls for service, and then you'll see the percentage of the number of CIT calls to the total calls. So currently for this year, we're sitting at 1.29% of our call volume is involving crisis intervention training or crisis intervention calls. I'm going to kind of explain real quick too why 23 and 24 had a spike for Snoqualmie. And I think we're all aware of, we have occasional repeat offenders, and that is particularly due to 1 or 2 people for those 2 years. So your truer numbers are going to look at what 2025 is. And that actually holds true for a consistency on the percentage of what North Bend is as well. So North Bend is averaging anywhere, for example, on percentage of 2023 at 1.52% of the call volume. 2024 was 1.31, And then this year is 1.12. So we're very consistent that our call volume for anybody with crisis or needing crisis intervention of some sort is just over 1% of our call volume. You'll see down here in this bottom box with the incidents, when we had the mental health professional in 2023 and 2024, those were the calls. That top line is the calls that she created. So 13 calls in 2023, 9 calls in 2024, and then how many reports she wrote for those years.
Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you. So just looking at the 2025 numbers, we have a significant reduction in the amount of calls, but the severity, if we're moving forward with 17 involuntary commitments instead of the 7 or the 12 from previous years, do we know whether those 17 involuntary commitments were like the same folks coming back through, or was it a number of different residents that were struggling?
It's
that
gonna
degree?
it's gonna vary. There's gonna be some repeats. It could be we'll repeat with like somebody who's suicidal. There's a chances that we may be going back and trying to get them help, and our only option at that point is to take them in. So, I mean, I can do a little bit more digging into that and figure that out. The 2024 drop is a little bit more of an odd. Your numbers are going to kind of average in that 12 to 10 to 20 range. 7 was a little low for 2024. I'll take it. If we can reduce it. And part of this is also encompassing those who, when you look at that number, there's half of them were not involuntary committed. So those are those who we've either gotten help through our other resources, which is coming up on other slides, where they've wanted to get help or they went voluntarily to the hospital to seek that help, or we utilize some of our local resources to get them that help for this year.
Councilmember Cotton.
And there was no changes in, like you said, like the coding, like what dispatch was doing from year to year to year, all that was the same. Now I know when MHP Butler was taking care of patients that obviously there was like less of the involuntary. Didn't she have some, like she would actually go with patients to get them, admitted through the system kind of a thing, where was it a little easier with having the mental health professional to, get these folks in and getting the services they needed?
So the ease doesn't change much because we have the authority to involuntary commit somebody. Sometimes there would be a little bit more of an ease on, for instance, if somebody wanted to seek treatment where she was able to kind of explain things a little better to them. However, since she's been gone, the officers have stepped up, and because of the amount of training we're doing in de-escalation, crisis intervention, they have kind of stepped up with that. We've also brought in the Recovery Navigator program, which I can talks about here. We utilize the Recovery Navigator program a lot, especially whenever there's substance abuse. They come out, they continually do follow-ups, including one of our repeat individuals who's included in the numbers even for this year, where all we do is make a phone call and they're following up with her, or they'll schedule a check-in with that individual. So we've utilized some of those. We also have the mobile crisis team that comes out and assists. We have Eastside Fire now has an integrated healthcare response unit that we've been utilizing. And of course, then we have the DCRs, Reclaim, and a host of other resources that the officers have come to rely on, and we've built fantastic relationships with all of them. A lot of it depends on the need of the person and a lot of what the person wants to do. The officers have really done a great job at taking on this duty. Most agencies, most cities don't have mental health professionals. And so they utilize their resources, and that's one of the things that our taxpayer our tax money covers, especially when it comes to like the King County stuff and the Recovery Navigator program and things like that.
Councilmember Cotton.
Um, and I think that's a really great that, the goal of getting all of the officers trained. I mean, you just don't know when you're going to be on that kind of a call, so everybody should have the training. But with the training that you folks have to go through, is that something that you have to pay, or do we belong to an association that provides the training?
So the training is the 40-hour training class is actually paid for through tax money. It's a tax that's put on through in King County, for example, for King County residents. And that money is utilized to pay and fund those courses.
Okay.
It is taught by mental health professionals, and a lot of the resources that we utilize, they're in those classes. They're standing up there telling us what, and presenting to the officers what they can do. And they're willing to come out and sit down with us at a department meeting, for example. So a lot of it just comes down to where we're at. If you look at the 1.29% of our call volume, that is a very small amount of our call volume to have an FTE. And I think the officers, and with the relationships we're building and the training that we're giving them above and beyond, I think we averaged a little over 100 hours of training per officer this last year. I don't see that changing going forward, because my goal is to get these classes and more done. And, you know, Acting Captain Moat and I were talking about that today, of what our priority is for next year, and just giving our officers a tool, whether it's in this area or in leadership, and just what they need to make sure things are continuing, because we are changing. This isn't the same department it was last year. We're reducing staff, we're reducing our patrol area and our call volume and everything else. So I think moving forward, the importance is just making sure that our staff is continually learning and adapting.
Okay.
Okay.
We're down at 5:52.
I'll let Drew take over now for a minute.
Okay. Bring us home.
Okay. So if council's interested in moving forward with a mental health professional, we do have some estimated costs here for different levels. So within currently our MMP salary schedule, we've got a mental health professional and community co-responder level 1, as well as a level 2 position. The estimated cost of the level 1 position is $151,000, and the estimated cost of a level 2 position for 2026 is $184,000. That includes wages, benefits, and vehicle charges such as gas, insurance, all that associated with the position, because they'd have to drive to the location in order to provide that service to that person that needs it overall. In terms of often what we come back to is kind of trying to figure out what lane we want to move towards in terms of balancing our finances. So we've all have seen kind of the financial forecast chart previously. Sorry, I'm going to hand over my computer. And so really our interest is in terms of trying to figure out what lane we want to pursue. Do we want to look at enhancing our revenues? Do we want to look at developing economically to support the position? Or do we want to look at optimizing levels of service overall, which is basically exchanging for costs in this area to shift those dollars towards, say, a mental health professional? We've provided this options preview previously. It's very preliminary and incomplete, but you've got your first lane there, which is enhancing revenues. We've already had a conversation a little bit about the public safety enhancement sales tax. There would also potentially be a grant that's associated with this as well. That 3-year, $100 million grant that the state has available out there, not necessarily just to this city, but to all local communities across the state. And as a result of that, that $100 million may go quickly, fairly competitively as well, of a process associated with that too. But we've also have some other additional enhancing revenue options there. We kind of have I think a good scope or understanding of what we could do to develop economically, and those options that are on the table right there. And then lastly, optimizing levels of service. And so the two additions to this table down below here within this optimizing levels of service is staffing reductions. So that would require removing or eliminating this position in this area, typically a general fund position, and then shifting those dollars towards the mental health professional. And then we also have speed safety cameras, which I did not bring up previously as well, that might help to reduce the speed limits, especially around school zones, which is really what the goal of that is, but could also bring in additional revenue to help provide that crisis intervention team support that we may potentially need as well. So I just want to make sure that those two options were there. But ultimately, it's council's decision about which direction you kind of want us to pursue. Once we have kind of an understanding of what lane you want us to go down, we can then help develop kind of a plan for how to support that. So anyway, that's it.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
I'm just going to quickly, because you've got about 60 seconds per council member. Councilmember Christensen, do you have any comments or observations?
It's a very small amount of following to have, but obviously the stakes are high, both for residents and for police officers. And so I appreciate the de-escalation, that's the trainings and things and the focus that you've had on that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Cotton.
I think we've kind of covered a lot of things.
Okay. So do you feel like, I guess I'm going to put you on the spot. Is this something that we should pursue of having a mental health professional position restored? Or is it a wait and see? Knowing that we have to find the money somewhere else or some other method.
I think at this juncture, it's a wait and see for me.
Okay.
Especially with finding out like the training and ongoing training that the officers are going through. And then the other resources that are available to us at this time, as long as it doesn't decrease any service that we're providing to our residents in this area.
Councilmember Christensen, thank you.
I think it's a conversation that we should consider having next year,
Okay.
as we get more information and things like that. Another thing that would be helpful to know is just whether they're going to continue offering the 40-hour trainings to officers. I know that there were some concerns about funding being cut.
So they did continue that. So it is going to continue. And even if it didn't continue in the King County, the way it was being funded, it is offered throughout the state.
Okay.
It's just not centrally located to where I can send them to the academy to get it. It was just going to make it a little more difficult because other agencies are putting it on. One of the other things is everybody's looking at this grant money, which is to support training. If we apply for the grant or when we apply for the grant down the road and we're at that point, I can utilize that money for a lot of this training to make sure that every officer is getting it. I've even talked to the academy about making sure that the 40-hour CIT class is offered to those who are in the academy before they come out and hit the road with us. That way we're not trying to figure out the timing of it later. It is a topic and it is something that is getting a lot of traction. So it's one of those things that I've been pushing and I think people are finally starting to kind of like, oh, why aren't we giving them those tools? Okay. So the officers, our response is not going to change. We're still going to be providing quality service to everybody.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, Chief. Well, we are at 5:57. If there's no objection, we will stand adjourned at 5:57 p.m. Hearing none, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.